Okay, so today we are going to talk about the infamous mirror scene, and I'm sure I'll do multiple videos on this. Already so many people have requested me to do an anatomy of a scene breakdown, which I will be doing, but for this particular scene, I feel it's necessary to kind of give you the lore and my opinions on it because I have a lot more complicated relationship with this scene than I do with the carriage scene. The carriage scene I love, I've always loved, I love pretty much everything about it, whereas here it's a little bit more complicated. So I want to preface my critical breakdown with just more personal insights and just tell you like how I feel about it and what I think. And that's gonna have to be two different videos. I originally wanted to do just one video for all of it, but I filmed it and it was just all over the place and it was just not, it just wasn't working. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do one video for the things that I have issues with about the scene, things that I would change, things that I didn't like, critiques, I guess, or things that I would add, etc. And then I'm going to do a separate video just being unhinged and gagging and watching it and reacting to it and pointing out all the things that I love, because there is a lot about the scene that I love. Oh my god. So I need to do two of those separately, and I don't really want them to interfere with each other. Like, I don't want the video where I'm being unhinged and fangirling to be dampened by the critiques that I have, but I also feel it would be disingenuous of me to not be honest about the things that I don't love about the scene. So that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to film those two videos, and I'm going to start with the things that I don't love. So before I get started, I just want to say that I have a really complicated history with this scene. There's a lot about it that I love, and there's a lot about it that didn't work for me, personally. But any criticism that I say isn't to tear down the scene or to speak ill of it necessarily, because all in all, I do like the scene. Especially after watching it more and more times. I've liked it more every time that I've watched it, and I've grown to really like the scene overall. But, as I said, I still have issues with it, so I do want to talk about those. And I do want to give constructive criticism where it's like, I think this would have been better, or let me explain why I think this didn't work. But, that being said, a lot of it is also subjective and depends on the person. Some of the things that just didn't work for me personally might work for you, and that's totally fine. We are all entitled to our own opinions and different things that work for us and don't work for us, and that doesn't speak ill of the scene itself either. Discourse around sex scenes can be tricky, but I want to make it clear, first and foremost, my main priority, and as I think it should always be, is the actor's safety and well-being. I'll expand upon this when I get into a select few moments, but I just want to make that clear and state that before everything else. That is what's most important, so as long as that was prioritized, that is what matters most to me. Just because something didn't work for me does not mean it didn't work for other people. I'm not deluded or selfish enough to think that just because something didn't work for me personally, that it's objectively bad. Or objectively, it didn't work for a lot of people. There's such a wide spectrum when it comes to the audience that you can never please everyone, and that shouldn't be the goal. And I also don't watch these scenes and go, oh, I didn't like this particular thing, so this is bad. Like, I get that I'm not the only audience member. This isn't about me. It's not just for me. So I understand that as well. And there are bound to be things that work better for some than others. It just is the way that it is. Lastly, the majority of my issues are in no way acting related. It has a lot more to do with the production design, the editing, the shot composition, the cinematography. I have way more issues with that than I have with any of the performances. There are a couple things in the performances that stood out to me or that took me out of the moment, which I will point out. But far and away, the thing that I have the most issue with is the composition of this. It has nothing to do with Polin or Penelope or Nicola or Luke. And there are some writing things as well that I have gripes with. So I basically am going to rewatch it on camera to point out the things that I didn't love. And we're going to get into it and talk about it. And then, as I said later, there will be another video. Don't you worry about that. There will be another video where I talk about everything that I love, because there is a lot to celebrate and be proud of and love in this scene. And I want to give it its flowers. But again, it would feel disingenuous to me to just pretend that I didn't have issues with it when I do. You know? But again, everyone's entitled to their own opinion. So don't hate me. If you love the mirror scene, I love that for you. If you love every single detail of the mirror scene, love that for you. We just disagree. It's just a difference of opinion, and that's okay. We're all entitled to our own opinions, so don't come for me, please. Okay, so the point that I'm going to start at is when he says, I love you. Because as much as I am a Polin person, and, I've done all this analysis, I've rewatched it a million times, I'm also extremely cognizant of the fact that I am not the general audience. I am not the average viewer. So many of these people who watch the show do not rewatch it a million times and do video essays on it and talk about it for hours on end, right? So like, I can't really compare my own experience and perception of it to the general audience in a congruous way. So while to me, it makes sense when he says, I love you, because I'm like, of course he's saying I love you. Of course he loves her. He's always loved her. Go watch my video essay about season 1 and 2, Polin. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, this has been building. And I noticed that and recognize that and do feel like it's had a good arc, generally speaking. There's something about this. When he said that, when he first delivered that line, every time, and honestly, every time I watch it, I get a little pang where I'm just like, ugh. Because I can just see how a lot of audience members will hear him say that line and be like, what? Like, since when? It will feel very out of nowhere, totally out of the blue, and just not well set up whatsoever. And I can see why and how they think that. Again, like I said, if you're an Eli viewer, you obviously have seen these hints and these things like that. And generally, I do think overall they've done a good job of setting it up. But there is something about his turn here, especially I think because he hadn't ever used the word love in the first 4 episodes to describe his feelings. He didn't say that in the carriage, right? He said he had feelings for her, so that feels a little bit different. There's much more gravity when you say I love you to a person's face than being like, oh, I like someone or I want to be with someone. Like, there's just a different energy between the two, and I don't know that it translated that well, and I don't know if the pause helped with this, because I think a lot of people probably lost that momentum in the break, and were like, wait, whoa, like, I know they hooked up in a carriage, but he's in love with her now? Like, what? Like, okay, since when? Since when did he know that? And it's kind of unclear whether he always knew that, he just realized that now. Like, when did that come to fruition in his mind as a fully formed idea that he understood about himself? I think should have been delved into more to start with. But also for this scene, I think this is the opportunity to prove your point. And I don't think that they did it as effectively as they could have. Because here's the thing. He's about to list all the things that he loves about her to her. Because she asks, are you sure? She's basically a cipher for the audience there going, whoa, are you sure? Are you sure about that? Because since when? And this was the opportunity where they really could have laid it out and made it make sense to everybody. And I think that it was just a bit of a missed opportunity, and it wasn't fully taken advantage of, the potential to get everyone on board with this, to make it make sense, to make it cohesive, to make it, flow correctly. But yeah, there's just something about this, whenever he says it, that I can understand how people would be like, what? Like, since when? That doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, as a very big fan, like, I get it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, yeah, checks out. Of course you do. You're just realizing that you do now. But I still can't help but feel like they could have done a better job making it very clear and concise for general audiences. So that's the first thing that stands out to me in this scene. Now, let's go on. Ooh, I'm scared. I'm sorry, don't cut for me. I promise I'm saying this with the utmost love, okay?
You are the cleverest, bravest woman I've ever known.
Okay, so this initial line is good, and I'll tell you why. It's because we have evidence to support it. We've seen in the show many instances of Colin witnessing Penelope be either brave or clever. Dealing with bullying against the Ton, that's another thing. Their banter and wit, the way that they spar with each other intellectually, he knows that she's smart. They write to each other, so he knows that. He knows her intellectually, so this makes a lot of sense. This is supported by evidence, which is why I don't have a problem with this line. But as we go on, we'll get to it.
You make me feel seen in ways I've never felt seen before.
This line I actually also really like. This is great. This is everything that I've been saying. Like, me and Colin Bridgerton are like this, because this is exactly what I said in my Polin relationship analysis. I was like, he loves that she sees him and believes in him in a way that nobody else does, and he desperately needs it and desperately wants it, and she's the only person in his life that has given that to him, and that's very valuable. However, it's a slippery slope with this type of compliment, which I'll get to later.
The way your hair cascades down your shoulder. The way your eyes shine when you look at me like 2 blue pools. The firmness of your lips parted just so. The softness of your skin.
Okay, I'll pause there. And at this point, I'm just focusing on the dialogue and writing. There's a lot in this scene that I have issues with the editing and the composition, but I'll get to that after I go through the dialogue. So the dialogue I want to break down. So I do like, in general, that they started with not just him complimenting her physically, being like, oh, you're beautiful, but the fact that he singled out specific elements of her physical appearance that he liked and that he wanted to compliment and that he wanted to accentuate and highlight in front of the mirror, because it makes her believe it more. It makes the audience believe it more, and it makes her believe it more. When you have specific things about the person, it feels a lot more impactful than just saying, oh, you're beautiful, or oh, I find you attractive. If you have specific things like hair, lips, eyes, whatever, specific qualities that you've been ruminating on and dreaming of and thinking about, that is a lot more effective. So I like that they broke it down that way to begin with. However, I do think that each of these lines just could have been better. They're not the worst lines. They're not the worst version of the scene by any means whatsoever. It could have been a lot worse. I'm not trying to deny that, but it could have been better. And I'll show you what I mean. So the first thing that he says is the way your hair cascades down your shoulders. Okay, common fodder for like a romance novel type thing. I actually don't mind this. I like that he's mentioning her hair, again, a specific quality. Again, I just think it could have been better. I would have liked in each of these more specific callbacks and references to moments, because the thing is, he actually hasn't seen her hair cascade down her shoulders that much. He did see her on the night that they kissed, they had their first kiss, her hair was unbound then. I would have liked if maybe he would have referenced that like that was the first time he had seen her hair unbound, and now he's been dying to see it down ever since. Or talking about, you know, in my dreams, your hair's unbound. Something like that. Adding to this, he could have kept the line about, you know, the way your hair cascades down your shoulders, but to me, again, I would like more evidence, and I would like a specific indicator of when this thought entered his mind, how long he's been thinking about it, and what prompted him to say this now. That supports what he's saying. So I would have liked if there was a specific instance that he referenced, because again, I don't think he has seen her with her hair unbound that much. Even if he had just talked about, you know, wanting to see her hair down more, wanting to run his fingers through her hair, or, you know, something like that. This is a bit much for a first time, but even like, I don't know, like maybe something like, you know, I want our kids to have your hair. I want a daughter with your hair, something like that. It is a bit much for a first time, but to me, I'm like, the gaggery of that, like, okay, period. That feels a lot more impactful to me. So I wish they would have expanded upon this a little bit or altered it slightly. And I'm sure I could come up with like 10 alternative lines. I need to think about it a little bit more, but there's a lot that you can say with this, and I just don't think it took full advantage of the opportunity that it had to really hammer home the way that he's been feeling. Also, at every one of these, I would have liked if he would have brought something up that he's noticed since childhood, because all of these, they do have to be sexually charged, because it's important that he's showing her that he has grown to desire her in a physical way, which is why he's pointing out these physical attributes. But I would also like if there was a hint to things that he had noticed all along, and not just now had started noticing in a sexual, romantic way. So he could have said something about, you know, her hair when they first met, her bonnet. Like, there's just a lot that they could have done that I think would have made it hit a little harder. Now, the next line, the way your eyes shine when you look at me like two blue pools. I'm so sorry. So sorry to this man, so sorry to this line. You guys, be so fucking for real right now. I'm sorry, I do not like this line. This is probably my least favorite line of this entire scene, and there's two reasons why I don't like it. One, you're getting into dangerous territory, making it about him. I feel like it's a misstep to bring him into the equation when he's complimenting her at this point in the scene. It works for the initial part of the scene because it's important that he does establish that that is something that he loves and appreciates about her, how she makes him feel, which is an important aspect of like why you love someone. But it's tricky because you don't want that to be the only thing or the main thing that you love about someone. And I've seen a lot of people be like, I feel like Colin just loves the way that Penelope loves him or the way that she makes him feel, which I feel like could have been skirted. That criticism could have been avoided if they had explained things a little bit better. And I don't agree with that, of course, but I can see how people would have that interpretation. So bringing him up again in this is dangerous territory. From that point forward, I think it needs to be solely about her, not him, right? So like the way you look at me, I don't think that should have been included at all. I think it should have been solely about her. So that's the first problem that I have with that line. But the second is, and far and away the most influential, is the wording. I really don't like the wording of this scene. I remember when I first read this dialogue, because this episode was released early, and the dialogue was leaked online. And I remember reading it, and it was actually being translated from another language. And I remember literally thinking to myself, oh, that's a translation error. I was like, there's no way that can be what he said. He had to be talking about waters or seas or oceans or like two blue pools. There's no way in hell that's what he said. Lo and behold, I get to the day, and alas, that is exactly what he said. And I'm just like, I'm so sorry, what are you even I hate that wording. One, it's clunky and awkward. Okay? It's not effective. I'm like, writer Polin where? Because you could be a lot more descriptive with your imagery, sir. Two blue pools? Also, I have a gripe with pools, because what does that even mean to this man? Certainly he's not talking about man-made chlorine-filled pools, right? So, what does he mean when he says pools? Like, is he talking about puddles? Is he talking about lakes? They're always in lakes, anyway. They could be oceans. Like, he's seen a bunch of oceans and bodies of water because of his travel. They could have taken advantage of that, obviously. Like, I've seen so many bodies of water, but none of them compared to your eyes. Like, hello? Come on now. And also, the thing is, this is so stupid. The descriptors of two and blue are completely superfluous, because if you're talking about eyes, there's going to be two. Okay, so that's unnecessary. And her eyes are blue, so it's going to be blue. And also, pools are blue, so it's going to be blue. So you don't need to say blue or two. You don't even need to say when you look at me, because you can infer that if you're talking about someone's eyes, it's when they look at you. But also blue, if they were going to say blue, like, at least make it a very specific shade. And this pisses me off because she has such gorgeous eyes. And of course he would love that about her. Like, that's actually one of her best features. So, but there's such a specific and vibrant shade that I really would have liked if they had capitalized on that. Blue? Blue? Like the fucking, crystalline, like, aqua, like, there's so many other descriptors that they could have used. The fucking, crystal blue waters of the Greek Isles, reminded me of your eyes. I would have liked if they would have brought in his time away, his time abroad, that, like, maybe bring in the letters. Like, I couldn't, look, because you weren't responding, I couldn't look anywhere and not see the color of your eyes. And, whenever I would look out onto the horizon, it would be, nothing compared to the crystal blue of your eyes. Like, there's so much that you could have done that would have been so much more impactful and would have just sounded better. Because what is two blue pools? That sounds crazy. That is crazy. Two blue pools. Huh? Huh? There's just a million other things they could have done that would have been so much better. Like, I want to dive in your eyes. I want to drown in your eyes. I want to get lost in your eyes. Like, there's... the potential is endless. And they went with two blue pools. Give me a break. Also, before we moved on to the physical compliment section, I think there should have been minimum at least one more compliment that was hyper specific to Penelope as a person, her personality, her wits, her kindness, something like that, a quality that is uniquely hers, that he would really need to know her and pay attention to her in order to enumerate. And the reason for that being that, like, this isn't exposition, but it kind of is, and it can serve as that to connect all the dots for the general audiences, for all these people. It can really fill in the blanks and connect the dots. It's like these different parts in the season. Okay, when did he get this idea? How long has he been thinking about this? It answers all these questions and pulls all these threads together. So, him talking about bravest and cleverest, you make me feel seen. I think there should have been at least one more. Maybe about their banter, about her wit, and that might have been nice to preempt the Whistledown reveal. Him talking about, you're funny, you're cunning and sharp and biting and witty, like what a barb type vibes. Something very specific to her that doesn't have to do with himself. At least one more, because I'm like, you're already standing in front of a mirror enumerating these qualities. You might as well do another one that helps the audience kind of, fill in the blanks and go, oh yeah, they do have that thing going on, and he does notice that about her, and she is like that, and oh, he must really pay attention to her if he does notice that about her. Something hyper-specific to her. At least one more that just had to do with her being before they got into the physical compliments. Okay, so for the firmness of your lips parted just so, I don't mind this. I think it's a little closer to what I'm talking about because firmness is a pretty specific descriptor. Parted just so is good. I like the movement. Conceptually, I like this. I like the movement. That's sexy, that's hot, that's sensual. Like, we love to see that. But, guys, look at the material. We're talking about lips here in a romance novel adaptation. There are so many other lines that just would have been better, that would have hit harder, that could have connected to other parts in the season. that would have been, that just would have, like, tied it all together better. Like, you know, I don't know. Maybe bring back the cupcake, okay? Like, maybe bring back that moment when he was literally screaming, crying, throwing up, watching her eat a cupcake. Like, he was so down bad. And then for both audiences and Penelope, it proves the point. Because if he were to say that to her, like, oh no, I couldn't, like, think about anything else. I couldn't think about anything else other than your lips after I saw you eat that cupcake. Or you know, there's a lot of things you could do with lips. Like, you know, I wanted to feel your lips on mine. I wanted to, the way you ate the cupcake, the way your lips, like, there's a lot, that they could have done. But something like that, if he had mentioned the cupcake incident, then to Penelope, she goes, oh wait, you were giving me a weird look then. That's what it was about? You were, like, thirsting after me and yearning for me and pining and longing? Oh my gosh, you've been thinking about it, you've been fantasizing about it, you've been dreaming about it, you had these specific examples and instances where you can point to and be like, no, I was obsessed with your lips then, like, I couldn't function. Even if he had mentioned, I mean, I don't know, maybe this is too down bad, but, like, if he had mentioned that, like, I had to go buy the same pastry just to, like, imagine what your lips would taste. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so many other things you could do for lips. He could even do, like, a triple whammy of, like, you know, the funny quips that come from your lips, and the kind words that come from your lips, and also just and add, like, then a sexual or physical thing about a lip, or you know, I don't want to. But I've read over 300 romance novels. Like, my mind is going, you know what I mean? There's just, like, so much else that they could have done that, again, I feel like would have been more impactful, could have tied other things in, and would have been more of a gag. Lips. Look at the material, guys. I want to feel your... You see what I'm saying? The firmness of your lips parted just so fine. Oh, it could have been better. It could have been better. So for the softness of the skin line, this is another one that feels a little bit weird and sticks out to me because he hasn't actually felt her skin that much. I could have done with, you know, like, the one time that he could have mentioned the carriage scene where he finally got to feel her skin, and now, like, ever since then he's been plagued by thoughts of it and, like, how soft it is and wanting to touch it again and wanting to get her alone to touch it again. Or even, you know, when they shook hands at the beginning with no gloves, like the skin-to-skin contact, something like that, if he had referenced that. Or, like, I've been, you know, thinking about how soft your skin is, or, you know, even bringing up other women because they obviously wanted to do the raking of Colin Bridgerton. They wanted to rakeify Colin Bridgerton, so if they wanted to do that, it's like, no skin has been as soft as yours, no skin has compared. Like, there, again, it's just, like, it's fine, softness of your skin, sure. We could do better, though. We can do better, people. Come on. Or, like, you know, there's, like, so many, like, how soft your skin, like, there's so many things I want to touch, so many things I've been dreaming about how your skin would feel against mine. Something like that. You know what I mean? There's just more gaggy lines, guys. Now, we get to the next part of the scene, okay? Okay.
And then there are other parts I've been dreaming about.
Okay. Few things to talk about here. One, the dialogue itself. So, and then there are other parts of you that I've been dreaming of. This is closer to what I'm talking about because this is specific. This gives insight into his headspace that you aren't able to do in an adaptation, that you are able to do in a romance novel. So him saying that aloud, like, other parts I've been dreaming of. Great. Period. Love that. This is closer to what I'm talking about. And yet again, guys, come on now. Come on now. This is like the creme de la creme. This is the cream of the crop. This is, I mean, the essence of it. This is the moment where you really need to be pulling out all the stops. You know what I mean? Like, this needs to be the line that's gaggy. Because again, the whole point of this is to show that you desire her physically. That your love for her as a person has transformed into romantic and sexual attraction and love. That's really what you're proving to her here, because they've always had friendship. So she knows that, like, he loves her as a person. He knows her as a person. So what he's doing by turning her in front of this mirror and pointing out all these things and, like, touching her while he's doing it is this kind of like seductive, introduction into how badly he wants her and how much he desires her, and enumerating the many ways in which he finds her sexually and physically attractive. Guys, so sorry to say it, this is the pinnacle. You know what I mean? This is where we really need to be putting our back into it. So, again, good line? Could have been great. Could have been excellent, in fact, and it should have been. Especially because of the fact that later, and again, one of the complaints about this, is that, there wasn't as much touching, especially, appreciating assets that people would have liked to see more of from Polin to Penelope. And, that's a whole debate in and of itself, and I will get into that, my thoughts on that. But if they weren't going to do that in the scene, I think it is a big missed opportunity to really hammer it home here verbally. It doesn't need to be physical here. So if that crossed any of the actors' boundaries, which is what I'm assuming. So what I'm assuming is that either Nicola or Luke or both of them were not comfortable with him touching her, boob without any barrier, without clothing, so like skin-to-skin contact, which is completely fine. Like that's completely understandable. I think that's like a completely fine boundary to have. Again, I think that should have been respected. So anybody who like wishes to see that or is disappointed that it wasn't there, you can be, but at the same time, again, like I'm like, sure, would I have liked to see it? Sure. Does it ruin the scene for me? No. You know what I mean? I'm also very cognizant of the fact that these are people. They're actors. They're not my little dolls. You know what I mean? They're not people that I can just like make do whatever I want. And that's what, Archive of Our Own is for. If you want to envision that and imagine that. Like, they're actors. They're not, it's not their job to do things that they're uncomfortable with sexually. Okay? So I cannot be disappointed in that. And in fact, I love that they didn't, if that is a boundary of theirs. But that's what I assume since there was no contact. I do wonder a little bit, though, if they wanted to respect those boundaries of like not having that contact, if they could have alluded to it. They could have had maybe Polin going to like reach for her cleavage or whatever, and then cut it off so you don't actually see the contact taking place, but it's alluded and implied, so it's canon in the show, it's actually happening and we're seeing it happen, but the actors don't actually have to act it out. Maybe that could have been good. But then another thing, I'm like, maybe they just don't want to put the time and effort into doing that. They'd rather just omit that particular form of contact from the scene, which is fine. I mean, you're not gonna die. Like, people who are freaking out about that, I'm like, go read a fanfic. Like, I don't know what to tell you. So if that's the boundaries and the parameters that we're working with, that both of them are comfortable with doing, here's the thing about this one moment as well. I don't know if this is a direction thing or an acting choice, but to me personally, okay, I'm not saying that it didn't work generally or that it didn't work for a lot of you, and if it did, I truly, genuinely love that for you. For me, I don't like the way that he does this little caress. I don't know why exactly. It feels a little weak sauce to me, I guess you could say. I'm like, get into it, because what do you mean? You're talking about all these dreams that you've been having. Elucidate me. Show me what you're talking about, because I highly doubt you had a little dream of going like this. You know what I mean? I'm like, okay, there's something about it that feels stunted and awkward to me and takes me out of the moment. I'm like, it doesn't feel, I don't know, it doesn't feel realistic to me, I guess. It doesn't feel like what he would be doing in that moment. And I guess you could make the argument that he's trying to be gentle, but having seen the carriage scene where they really got into it, I'm like, feels a little strange. If he was going to be gentle, I would have liked for this type of a touch to happen before we already saw them getting into it in the carriage scene. Because to me, I'm like, you know what to do. You know what to do, and you're just not doing it right now. I've seen you do it. And again, assuming that both actors were comfortable with that, given that we've seen multiple instances of it in the carriage scene, I'm like, why aren't y'all getting into it? Like, what is this, like, weak, what, grab that shit. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry. To me, I'm like, what? Or, like, touch it, like, don't touch the side, like, or go straight from the skin. He was already at the skin if he would have gone to the skin itself, like touched her on the cleavage of her skin rather than over the fabric. And I mean, he kissed her with clothes on. So like, assuming, again, Nicola can remain clothed and there's no actual like contact, again, just a repeat of something like the carriage scene, either with his mouth or his hand, he's touching the cleavage, the skin. Or even going a little bit under the dress, and still over the corset, so there's still a barrier and there's no direct contact between the two of them. Assuming, again, that everyone's comfortable doing that. I would have liked that. I would have liked a more direct touch, a more upfront touch. Then as he kind of rounds about to, like, grab it, I just am like, okay. It just doesn't feel right to me. I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. It doesn't feel sexy to me. It doesn't feel like that's how he would be touching her or grabbing her or, you know, any of that type of stuff. And again, I like the idea that he's trying to be gentle, but we've already seen some of this in the carriage, so what are we doing now? Like, it doesn't, and again, there's just something about, like, the way that his hand moves and the way that the shot follows it that, for me personally, I don't find it effective, and it, in fact, is a little awkward to me. It just is like, okay. So that's one problem that I have with this, and that's personal preference. So a lot of people could have loved the way that he did that and found it very sexy. For me personally, just didn't work. But what he's saying, you know, there should be something sexy about, you know, he's talking about dreaming about her boobs and, like, looking at her in the mirror while then, like, going to touch her. They could have done a better job of upping the sensuality and emphasizing the sexiness of, like, them both watching themselves in the mirror, like them making eye contact and then his eye contact moving to, you know, her boobs, and then, like, you know, he's watching the way that she's reacting to his touch. They could have done a lot more to emphasize that and to make that more visceral, right? Like, that would have felt a lot more sexy, because they didn't really do anything to emphasize that, and it kind of ramped up very quickly. I don't love the pacing of it, where it's like she starts breathing really heavily and then we turn around and, like, I don't know. And even when she grabs his hand to, like, you know, say get into it, I'm like, it just doesn't work for me. It doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't sit right in my spirit. I'm like, I'm sorry, Mr. Polin, I Love Boobs Bridgerton is doing this? Give me a break! Or if he had talked about, you know, like, that it was a dream come true when he got to touch her in the carriage. Or that he finally felt, you know, what her boobs felt like in the carriage. And, like, ever since then, he's been dying to get her alone, to be with her in that way. Or, you know, I would have liked something like in the book. There's a line, I don't know that I can say it out loud, there's a couple lines in the book that I think would have worked really well here. Or something like it, a variation of it, that I think, again, just would have been more gaggy. Like, it would have felt more kind of a little bit scandalous, a little bit like, whew, okay, whoa. And again, dreaming about is getting closer to the essence of what I'm talking about. So I do like the attempt, and I do think this is probably maybe the closest line to, like, the kind of picture that I am wishing he would have been painting in this instance. But, guys, there's so much more they could have done with this. And again, especially if they weren't going to have that contact later in the scene, which, again, I want to make clear, I'm completely fine with. I would much rather have them be comfortable than anything else. But if they are going to miss that element of it, then I would have liked if they had had some dialogue here that really went into it. That really was, like, making, you know, Polin being a boob man, like, canon. And they did, but, like, it's like a soft canon. You know what I mean? It's soft. It's a little weak. I would have liked it to be a little bit more, little oomph, a little more verve. So yeah, that's my issue with that. Let's continue, I guess. And again, this is my video pointing out all the negatives. So there's things in this that I'm, like, loving. I go back and forth about these kisses because it does feel like she's giving 80 and he's giving 20, but I think I've now decided that I like it because it's like a push and pull, like he's trying to hold back, but until she's like, no, we're doing this, and then he kind of gets into it more, so I guess I kind of like that. That's fine. We'll get to the things that I like, don't you worry about that. Let me go back and talk about the editing and composition of these compliments. So this is not talking about the dialogue, this is not talking about performances, this is the editing and the cinematography.
You make me feel seen in ways I've never felt seen before.
I don't know what it is about that push-in on Pen. I like the fact that they're pushing it on Pen. Something about it is awkward to me. That's, again, personal preference. That's just a personal opinion. It might be that Colin's face is getting cut off, but again, we're trying to focus on Penelope, so that shouldn't be an issue. Like, I get that they're trying to push in on Penelope's reaction to what Colin's saying. It's not really about Colin, so Colin can slowly shift out of frame. But there's just something about the way that they're zooming in that I don't love.
And then there's
Okay,
the way your hair
cut to that.
cascades down your shoulder. The way your
Guys,
eyes
I can't.
shine
The way this is
when you
edited
look
drives
at
me
me like two blue
nuts.
pools.
Okay. Let me go back and show you what I mean. We have the shot of pen, then we have the overhead shot of him taking the pen out of the hair. I don't really mind that, right? It's an artistic kind of shot. It's a bit of like a Dutch angle. It's from overhead. Like they're trying to do that and have like, you know, the hair cascade down the shoulders as he's saying it, right? So I get that. That shot feels goofy to me. I'm sorry. The pen falling on the floor was that necessary. I don't like these shots from the ground. They feel very like cheesy to me. They feel very like out of place and cheesy. They take me out of the moment. They ruin the momentum. Then they cut back and her hair's up. So this is a continuity error. I don't think to them it's actually an error. I think they probably meant to have it be like an artistic montage type thing. So they're intersplicing different shots and different audio from different points. And it's not all completely in sequence, right? Like, I don't think they're trying to do that. But to me personally, I'm trying to process each shot as it's coming while I'm also trying to process the dialogue. So then these things jar me. Like, it stands out to me because I'm like, okay, we literally just saw him take the pin out of her hair and the pin drop to the ground. And the immediate shot that you cut to after that is her hair still pinned up? Huh? Make that make sense. Because where are we? I should not be trying to figure out, like, what's going on in this moment. You know what I mean? And it's just, like, confusing and jarring and disorienting to me to be like, okay, well, oh, her hair's down. Okay, now her hair's up. Okay, the pin was on the floor, though, but okay, now we're doing this. So the continuity there I don't love. Then we also have his audio continuing while we're just seeing the shot of them silent, staring at each other in the mirror.
The way your eyes shine when you look at me like two blue pools.
Now, I like the idea of just having a shot of them silently staring at each other in the mirror, the tension, the buildup, the anticipation. But just let that moment breathe. Don't put his audio over it. Like, let that moment stand. Let us hear the silence. Let us hear the fizzling tension. You know what I mean? Let us live in that moment with them. Don't put it in a montage with his audio overhead. The audio that he's saying is a different moment than the visual that we're being shown. But it's kind of being sold as if it's the same thing, so then it's confusing, and it's like, okay, but these aren't, so this is a different shot, this was a different point in the time, because they're not speaking, but we hear his audio of speaking. Maybe they're trying to be time efficient, I guess, but to me, it's just super choppy, it just doesn't really work. It feels super all over the place, and then he's going to take the thing out, now her hair's down. Again, we're getting his audio, they're looking at each other, that's fine. The whole rest of this is fine, because it actually matches up with his, like, delivering the line and the visual matchup. But I just don't like all the, like, cutting back and forth. Again, I think they were going for, like, a montage type thing, but it just felt super jarring to me. It was just like, wait, what's going on? Her hair's up, her hair's down, the pin's on the floor, but now he's taking her hair out still, and oh, they're silent now, but you still hear his voiceover, and when did this happen, and what's the sequence of events? Like, it just took me out of the moment. It was very choppy to me. It felt very jarring. To me personally. Again, that's a stylistic thing. Maybe some people love that. To me, it really was not doing it, especially for this moment. And again, like I said, I would like if they let the moment breathe a little bit more. You can still do those close-ups, but, like, have it be there's silence in between what he's saying, or more movement, or something. Like, I just think it could have been better. And I, again, could, like, give you a shot list directly of, like, okay, let's have this shot, then this shot, then this shot, then this audio. Like, I could give you examples of what I mean, but, again, this just felt very jarring to me. Okay, and then we go, again, I don't love the shot from the ground. Could have done with maybe more unlacing of the corset. I don't mind it, though. That feels goofy to me. The drop period coin. I just have to say that every time, because you know what's not wrong? You know what's right in the world? That is right in the world. Couldn't be better if it tried, okay? Never mistake any of my criticisms for being for that. Absolutely not. Could never be me. Could never criticize that. But the way that the, like, fabric drops to the ground, I don't like that shot from the bottom. I also have conflicting feelings because there is a way that this can be done really well. I'm thinking of books that I've read where it's like the woman gets undressed and then the man is fully clothed, where that can be kind of sexy. But there's something about this. I'm like, the visual image of all of her clothes dropping straight to the ground and her being pretty much fully naked, and then him in his boots is kind of crazy to me. I'm like, for the love of God, take off your boots at least. Because this woman, and this poor woman, this is her first time in broad daylight in front of a mirror, and you're gonna have her be completely naked while you're completely clothed down to your boots? Huh? There's something about the visual of that I just was like, I don't know, it scared me. But again, maybe that's a personal thing. But it's weird because, like, there is a way that could really work for me, and it has worked for me in other instances, but just here, it just doesn't, personally. But maybe to you, if it worked and that was, like, a little sexy and a little, like, you know, turning on to you, where it's like, okay, well, he's fully clothed and she's naked, then I love that for you. Great for you. For me, not so much. I also, okay, the lighting in the scene is really good. However, I do have an issue here. Oh, guys. Even this could have helped with the boob of it all. The way that the light is moving, well, the way that the shot is moving, makes it so that the light, like, covers his face, and you can't see his immediate reaction to her getting naked! You can't see his facial expression. It's literally, like, lit up. The sun is covering it. And I'm like, you had one job. You literally had one job. Why didn't we get a close-up of that? You know what I mean? Like, why didn't we cut to a close-up? We do that, and then we cut to the close-up of his reaction, or something. Or just make sure that the light isn't literally blocking his expression as she disrobes for the first time. Okay? And his reaction to seeing her. That's important. And I'm not just saying this, like, as a, like, to be, like, in horny jail. I'm saying this, like, narratively, it's important. For them as a couple, it's important. We need to see these things. Again, the evolution of their relationship, friends to lovers, having been unrequited, we need to see Colin desiring her in this way. There needs to be emphasis on that. So, the fact that there wasn't, I'm like, and because they have already done some insults to Penelope in the show, about her appearance, about her, you know, being 2 stone heavier than she ought to be. Things like that, again, I think hammering home that he really loves this and he really finds her attractive and all the things that make her her and all the, you know, parts that she has and all the qualities that she has and, you know, all that type of stuff is important. So the fact that, like, the sun is blocking his reaction to her disrobing is crazy to me. And also, again, the line from the book, I would have... Well, I go back and forth whether I like that he didn't say anything here. I don't know if I like whether he did or didn't say anything here. Especially as she covers herself up. I could see a world in which it could be good where they do something like, you know, he's like, don't cover yourself, like, I want to see you, something like that. But at the same time, I also can see a version of it, which they did here, where it's like, you know, she's obviously uncomfortable. It's her first time. She's like wanting to cover herself, and he doesn't point it out or make her feel embarrassed about that. Like, he gives her her kind of, like, dignity and autonomy to be able to cover herself. But if the whole point of the scene is also, like, no, I'm showing you how I see you and how I view you, and you need to love yourself like I love you unconditionally, then I could see how that might be a little disjointed to some people as well. But again, that could be an actor thing. Nicola might have only, you know, been comfortable having, you know, a full shot for a second, and then she wanted to cover herself, which is completely fine. So if that's the case, then it works for the scene as well. Both versions work, because I could see that being Colin being, like, not wanting to point it out or knowing that she'll get more comfortable over time with him and not wanting to push her any further than she's already gone. We love that.
Lie down.
Okay, I'm not going to get into it. I'll get into it on the other video, but that's literally maybe the best line of dialogue of this entire scene, and it's fucking improv. It's a suggestion that Nicola had in her mind, and thank you, and I bow down to you, and mother, but, like, that should not be the best line of dialogue in this scene! That should not be the most gaggy line of dialogue in this scene. The one that was suggested by the actor. You know what I mean? But that is a gaggy line. I'll get to it! His expression is crazy, though. It's kind of, I don't know if I love it or hate it. But generally speaking, this is good. This is fine. Hate that shot. I hate it. I'm sorry. I get what they're going for. They wanted the focus to go from his belt. They wanted to show him in all his glory, like, unclothed. They wanted to do a nod back to the mirror, so then they have it, but he's like, the belt is now in focus. He's out of focus. He's blurred in the background, but you can still see his silhouette in the mirror. Sure. Maybe it's the editing of it. but the flash of that shot is so goofy to me. It is so goofy and cheesy to me, and it has been ever since I first saw it. And the thing is, when I first saw this, everything was such a gag because I was just like, you know, you've been anticipating it and thinking about it and wondering what it's going to look like, and then it's actually happening in front of you, so you don't even really process, like, the way that you actually feel or what you would have liked or disliked or whatnot until after the fact. So while I might have been gagged by that in the moment, literally immediately after, I was like, I didn't like that shot. You know what I mean? Like, after I had a second to think about it, I was like, that was a little awkward. The editing was a little weird. Like, that didn't feel so, I don't know. I don't know that I love that. And that was my immediate reaction after the scene. I was like, because again, I think also it's difficult with the break. They've been hyping up this scene so much, so it's never going to live up to your expectations because everybody has their own version of the scene already formulated in their head, right? So it's bound to be like disappointing or anticlimactic regardless, no matter what. But at the same time, you know, the way that Luke and Nicola talked about it being like, oh, the carriage scene is tame in comparison. And it is, speaking in the fact that, like, they actually have sex in the scene and also that there's nudity. Like, sure, technically the carriage scene is more tame, but to me, the way that they were talking about it, I was expecting the scene to be like, you know, off the charts, like sexy. Girl, the carriage scene, to me personally, for my personal opinion, in my humble onion, is so much sexier than this scene. And this scene is sexy, and it gets more sexy as time goes on, and the more I watch it, the sexier it gets, the more gifts that I see, the sexier it gets, and the performances are great in this scene. I do want to give them their flowers for that, and I will talk about it in the other thing, but again, it just felt a little, like, disjointed. Like, it felt, I was like, they were really hyping that up to be something, and to me, the carriage scene was so much more of a gag, you know what I mean? The carriage scene was so much more of a gag, so it just felt a little, like, confusing. But again, that's personal preference, and that's, you can't avoid that. You can't avoid, like, disappointment, you can't avoid any of these things. So this isn't necessarily anybody's fault, but it's just, like, the fact of the situation, and I think the break probably didn't help that because they had that whole time to then be hyping up this next part. And no matter what, people are kind of going to be like let down because they've already made their own versions in their own head. And it's not going to live up to everybody's expectations. It's not going to hit for every single person. So there's bound to be a little bit of that disappointment. Okay, so this moment right here does stand out to me as like an actor thing. It did take me out of the moment, which again is fine. It does read to me as like a, you know, Nicola wanted to do some, like, she wanted to cover up, so then, like, him covering her with a blanket is them having each other's back, which on one hand I love, because I'm like, oh my god, teamwork, like, they respect each other, they have each other's backs, they're, like, communicating and, you know, helping each other out, and of course, like, that's, you know, I don't have a problem with her wanting to cover herself, or wanting to have shots where she's not totally exposed, that's not it. This maybe is an editing thing, because did they have to even put that shot in? Could they not have gone to a closer up shot where you don't see that happen? I don't know if anybody else clocked it as that, but to me, I was like, oh, that's Nicola and Luke, the actors, rather than like, that's Colin and Penelope. It felt more like that. Even though you could make it work for Colin and Penelope, you could be like, oh, well, Colin's trying to like preserve her modesty and make her feel more comfortable, so he's covering her up. Something like that. You could make it work for that. But again, it's just the type of thing where I was like, oh, that's an acting tick. That's a thing. And that's part of the reason why the carriage scene reigns supreme to me, is because there was not a single moment in that entire thing that made me go, oh, they're actors acting. Whereas, like, this was a little bit, it took me out of it. But they are actors acting, so there's bound to be moments like that no matter what. That's really nobody's fault. It just is what it is. It's just like there's gonna be moments to different people that register as different things or kind of take them out of the moment, and for me personally, that did. But again, my priorities are safety and comfort, so if that's what they needed to do, period. But again, I'm like, did they need to cut to the wide shot on that, where we see that happening? Maybe it was intentional. Maybe they wanted to show, like, Colin caring for Penelope, and that's what it was reading as. But again, just personally to me, it reminded me more of like, oh, they're actors covering themselves, rather than like, oh, they're Colin and Penelope in the moment. You know what I mean? But again, I don't really have a problem with that. It just did stand out to me a little bit. Oh, and then okay, here's one of the last things that I have an issue with. The production design. Who made the decision to have their first time be on a chaise longue? Come on now, guys. Because like with their height difference, to me, I just find this to be very awkward positioning and staging. He's so, like, long, and she's so tiny. And also, okay, from a character standpoint even, I'm like, this is her first time. You're already making her undress in front of a mirror in broad daylight. Her first time. And you're not even going to give her the courtesy of a bed? Get this woman a bed. Get her some cushioning. You know what I mean? Like, give her some more cover. Like, give her, because also the way that she was propped up, like, you had to have, she actually could have been covered more if she was in a bed. They could have choreographed it in a way where it was, like, that, and she had more support. Also, Luke had to, like, brace himself on the freaking handle or whatever of the couch. And I'm like, could we not have had a fluffy cushion in a bed? And I don't know why they chose that, because I genuinely think it's a very strange choice. I don't know if they were trying to be like, oh, Polin and Penelope are freaks, they do it in places that's not a bed, but we already got that with Carriage. If they were trying to be accurate, because they're like, well, they haven't moved in, so there wouldn't be a bed in there. Since when have you cared about accuracy? Give them a bed. There can be a bed in this old house that they have used occasionally. You know what I mean? Like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that there would be a chaise longue, but not a bed. So it's not totally inconceivable that there would be a bed there. Let them be in a bed! For character and actors, like, literally, and also just visually, like, those shots are a little stunted to me. They're a little awkward, and that's neither of their fault. It's literally the furniture that they're on. That could have been so easily solved if they were just in a bed. Why could they not have been in a bed? Come on. Come on now. So many things could have been solved if they were just in a bed. I don't understand. I think that's such a bizarre, and it broke, so, but I'm just like, I just find that to be such a bizarre choice. I would like to know, like, the thought process behind it, I guess, because I'm like, why did you choose a chaise longue rather than a bed for their first time? Especially given the height difference between the two of them, because that is a different factor to take into consideration that the other two pairs didn't have. So instead of, like, accommodating for that, this accentuates it. Like, this makes it even more obvious to me to have them be in this, like, type of positioning. And also, let them be comfortable. For the love of God, please. So yeah, those are my main gripes with it. I'm sure there's some other things. And again, this is, like, just stylistic. A lot of it is preference. Were there things I would have liked to see? Sure. I would have loved if there was, like, shots from the perspective of the mirror. Even, because that would be a nod to the, because I love that they added the mirror, but the thing is, Colin's line in the book is, I want to do it in front of a mirror, so I would have liked if there was a nod to that, like, maybe in the scene they cut to a shot from the perspective of the mirror, or maybe, you know, Colin's looking at the action through the mirror, or he tells Penelope to look at them in the mirror. But, that being said, there's a lot that I love about it, and I'm going to talk about that now. So I will see you for that video.